When listing some of the greatest coaching jobs since 2000, it's no surprise that the methodology tends to circle in on one thing: national championships. With Nick Saban and his 7 national championships hanging up the headset this past month, the conversation around who the greatest coach in college football since 2000 has resurfaced. Is it Kirby Smart? Maybe Mac Brown? Bobby Stoops? How about Urban Meyer? Sometimes great coaches don't win national championships. Nobody will argue about the job Bill Snyder did to save Kansas State football from annihilation, twice in 1990 and again in 2009. He's in the same company as Frank Beamer from Virginia Tech, Power 5 guys who never got the chance to bring home a national championship, but definitely did as good a job, if not maybe better, than some of the national championship winning coaches out there. But even further still, there are some coaches who never coached at the Power 5 level that have done phenomenal coaching jobs. Let's not forget Larry Blakeney at Troy, single-handedly saving that program from being an also-ran. Each of these coaches have stories, and each of these coaches did phenomenal coaching jobs. But none of them, and I mean none of them, have had the same tragedy consistently hit them as one coach has. No, he won't be confused as one of the greatest coaches since 2000. That's not the point I'm making here. But he did consistently perform some of the greatest head coaching jobs in college football over 25 years, only to have his career consistently ripped away from him due to something he can't control. He's no saint, he's no villain, just a man trying to walk through the hallways of football. But even that doesn't come so easy. This is Jerry Kill, the most tragic coach in college football. Football doesn't come naturally to a lot of people. Some people aren't born with the physical fortitude to withstand hit after hit, tackle after tackle, for at least the 4 years necessary to go through their freshman through senior years of high school. Add another 4 years for college, and it's a disproportionately smaller sample size. Now look at those that go into coaching, which is an even smaller number than those who played. Football comes naturally to Gerald R. Kill. Jerry was born in Cheney, Kansas on August 24, 1961, just 22 or so miles outside of Wichita. Cheney is a lot like pretty much every other eastern Kansas town, named after a railroader, part of the old cattle railroad, and built off the backs of hardworking middle-class Americans. The Kills were a group of those people. Undersized but tenacious, Jerry excelled on the football field for the Cheney Cardinals, his high school team, before moving on to college at Southwestern University in Winfield, Kansas. He wasn't a phenomenal athlete, and only weighed about 160 pounds at linebacker for the Mound Builders, but that didn't stop him from being named a 2-time team captain and an all-conference selection for the Division II KCAC. He graduated from Southwestern in 1982, and with no prospects of playing pro football, decided to use his knowledge of the sport as a career and got into coaching. His first stop was at an NAIA school, nearby Pittsburgh State, as their defensive coordinator in 1985 at just 24 years old. He was hired by Dennis Franchione, a Pitt State alumnus who would later go on to be a familiar face in college football as the head coach of Texas A&M and later Texas State. While DC for the Gorillas from 1985 to 1987, Jerry helped orchestrate a dominant defensive squad that won the conference 5 times in a row, 3 with Jerry as DC. In 1988, however, he chose to leave Pitt State to take the head coaching job at Webb City High School in Webb City, Missouri. It's here that we start to see something different about Coach Kill and how he chooses to do things as a coach, even in a place as small as a high school. Some coaches step in and succeed and then leave over a course of 3 years and leave the place no better than they found it. According to Webb City's principal, Jerry didn't just help build the football team. He helped build the community too. Contagious, he calls him. Since Kill has coached there, the Cardinals have become one of the state of Missouri's most recognizable high school programs due to their continued success. He was their head coach for 3 seasons from 1988 to 1990, before once again leaving to return to Pitt State, this time as their offensive coordinator from 1991 to 1993 under head coach Chuck Broyles. Since Jerry had been gone, Pitt State had elevated from the NAIA to Division II and had joined the MIAA. He proved his worth on the offensive side of the football as well, leading the Gorillas to a 13-1-1 season and a D2 national championship in 1991, as well as the runner-up spot in 1992. After losing in the first round of 1993, Jerry received his first ever offer to be a head coach in 1994 at the Division II Saginaw Valley State University. This is where his true coaching odyssey begins. Before Kill arrived in Michigan, Saginaw Valley was underperforming. The Cardinals hadn't won more than 7 games in a season since 1984, and the previous coach, George Eiler, had been a combined 61-52 in 11 years as head coach and hadn't placed first in the Great Lakes since his first 2 seasons. Ignoring those first 2 seasons, SVSU was 44-49. They were slowly getting worse. Given his track record at Webb City and the ability to run a show quickly like at Pitt State, Jerry seemed like the right hire at the ripe old age of 33. His first year at SVSU, he led the Cardinals to a 6-4 record. He proceeded to follow up that 1994 season with 2 7-3 seasons and 2 9-3 seasons, slowly elevating the Cardinals to heights they hadn't seen since the early 80s, and really since their inception in 1975. He coached 17 all-conference athletes and 2 All-Americans with a combined overall record of 38-14, including postseason play. By 1998, he'd managed to bring them from 4th in the Midwest Intercollegiate Football Conference to tied for 2nd. His coaching acumen was enough to catch the attention of a school from closer to back home, the Emporia State Hornets of the Mid-America Intercollegiate Athletics Association, also Division II. Unlike SVSU, Emporia State hadn't spent a long time in the gutter. There were still folks there in Kansas who remembered when, in 1989, the Hornets had managed to make it all the way to the NAIA title game, where they lost 20-34 to Carson Newman. Since then, they joined the MIAA of Division II and had been on the way up under former Good Morning America attendee Larry Kramer and podcaster Manny Matsakis. But both Kramer and Matsakis had left ESU in flux upon their exits to become assistants at the Division IA level, Kramer at K-State and Matsakis at Wyoming. The Hornets needed someone to come in and right the ship. That someone was deemed to be Jerry in 1999. Jerry was joined by 2 faces that will remain consistent throughout his career. One, Tracy Claeys. The former Kansas State Wildcat and Clay Center native had been the DL coach under Coach Kill at Saginaw Valley and followed him to Emporia, where he was elevated to defensive coordinator. 2, offensive line coach Matt Limgrover. The former Chicago Maroon had spent some time as interim head coach, but joined Coach Kill in Emporia to be their offensive line coach. 1999 proved that the roster Coach Kill inherited in Emporia was not as good as it had been the previous year. Despite standout victories against in-state rivals Fort Hays State and Washburn to bookend the season, the Hornets were up and down, falling by 14 to Kill's old team in Pitt State and by 31 to Northwest Missouri State, to finish 5-6 and miss the postseason. Still, it wasn't all problems. Lester McCoy broke the Emporia State and MIAA conference record for touchdown receptions with 16, all behind the arms of Kelton Copeland and Joe Jacobs. It was clear that the program was rebuilding and moving in the right direction. They'd continue this development with a 6-5 season the next year in an increasingly competitive MIAA. The Hornets lost to Pitt State and Fort Hays and got blown the heck out by Northwest Missouri, but still managed to beat Washburn, those bods ain't got nothing on Corky, and still made an effort to move forward. In fact, during his time under Coach Kill, Kelton Copeland would proceed to develop nicely as a quarterback in both the running and passing departments. He would lead ESU in total offense in his junior and senior seasons, and rank 3rd all-time in total offense and 4th in passing yards following his final season as a Hornet. But it wasn't long before Jerry found himself climbing the mountain again, this time from Division II to Division I FCS at Southern Illinois in 2001. The Salukis, a member of the Missouri Valley Football Conference, which at that point was called the Gateway, weren't much of a successful football program. Aside from a national championship in 1983, they hadn't had much success recently at all, and hadn't won more than half their games in a season since 1991, a full 10 seasons before they hired Kill. Jerry's first season in 2001 was indicative of the struggles the Salukis had faced in recent years, struggling out the gate to a 1-10 finish, with their only victory coming over in-state rival Illinois State on homecoming weekend. A full off-season and some recruiting later, and the fruits of Jerry's labor started to grow. 4-8 in 2002, then a phenomenal burst onto the national scene with a 10-2 season in 2003, a number 9 ranking in the country, and division co-champions with Northern Iowa. The dream, Jerry Kill's dream, was still alive, and it just kept growing from there. In just 2 seasons, he'd taken the Salukis from 1-10 to their first postseason run in the FCS tournament in 20 years, losing in the first round to Delaware. He made the tournament with a similar result the following season, earned his first postseason victory in 2005, much the same the next season, and then finally made his longest postseason run in 2007, making it to the semifinals before faltering once again at the hands of the Fightin' Blue Hens. But the defense was coming on strong under, you guessed it, Tracy Claeys, whose Saluki defense now led the nation in defensive scoring in 2004, allowing only 13.2 points per game, as well as on offense, led by offensive coordinator, again, good guess, Matt Limgrover, whose offenses regularly hung 40, 50, 60, and sometimes 70 and 80 points on competition. But it wasn't without some lurking sense of darkness creeping in for Coach Kill. Kidney cancer, taking the physical form of seizures. Toward the end of a game against Illinois State in 2005, Jerry suffered a seizure on the Saluki sideline. He'd had more, not in public, before that incident. He didn't tell anyone. Despite these health scares, Kill insisted he was healthy, which was good because he still had to climb another mountain. He beat his cancer and instantly got to work on his next project. This time, he'd moved from the south of the state to the north, going from Southern Illinois of the FCS to Northern Illinois of the FBS MAC Conference in 2008. The Huskies weren't in terrible shape in 2008, having gone 2-10 at the previous year in a season that got the last head coach, Joe Novak, fired. But they had gone 7-6 in 2006, making the Poinsettia Bowl, and went 7-5 without a bowl berth the year prior, with a 9-3 season in 2004 still in the rearview. They just couldn't get over the hump. Jerry's job now wasn't to build, but to elevate. And elevate he did. Bringing over both Limgrover and Clays to be his assistant coaches, Kill was able to immediately right the ship in DeKalb, going 6-7 in year one, losing the Independence Bowl to Louisiana Tech. He followed that season with a 7-6 season in 2009 and a loss in the International Bowl before finishing with one of the best seasons in Northern Illinois history in 2010. 10-3, perfect in the MAC until the championship game, and a berth in the Humanitarian Bowl against Fresno State. A hospitalization for dehydration early in the season raised some eyebrows on his health again, but since it wasn't a seizure, fans felt Kill was still healthy enough to coach. Another part of the Huskies' dominance was due to Chandler Harnish. The starting QB for Jerry Kill's entire 3-year tenure at NIU, Harnish would throw for a total of 40 touchdowns and add another 13 on the ground. He'd explode onto the national scene as a senior, finishing as a semifinalist for the Walter Camp Award and dominating on the ground as well as the air. But he'd do it under a different head coach. Prior to the Humanitarian Bowl, Jerry Kill was approached by members of the brass in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Tim Brewster, the former Gopher head coach, had gone just a measly 3-9 and had just lost to Kill's Huskies that season. On top of that, the Big Ten was getting bigger, with the introduction of then blue blood Nebraska now a certainty for the 2011 season as an opponent Minnesota would have to share common space with in the West. The Gophers, a long stretch away from their 3 straight national championships in the 30s, needed to rebuild from the ground up. Coach Kill agreed, and left DeKalb before the bowl game, leaving Tom Matukovich as interim coach. With a motley crew of Gophers and his coaching staff, Jerry lurched forward into 2011, needing to build something from scratch again. And it wouldn't be immediate like his work in Illinois. The Gophers would start out strong early, a testament to Kill's ability to circle the wagons in a depleted group, with a close loss in Los Angeles against Matt Barkley and the USC Trojans, and stumble in a close loss against a New Mexico State team that would finish 4-9 before finally picking up their first win against Miami of Ohio in Week 3. Then the wheels came off. Kill would have his second public seizure, a grand mal seizure, against the Aggies. This one for more of the college world to see. A Power 5 coach on the ground, surrounded by support staff, spasming and needing immediate medical attention, is one of the most nerve-wracking images a person can see in sports. When players are injured, the air gets sucked out of most stadiums. The place goes quiet. Video boards go dark. Players on both sidelines take a knee. But coaches aren't on the field. They don't get hurt like players do, where you can watch their body take a big hit and infer what's going on. Jerry just fell, tackled by some unseen force from inside his brain. But the season went on. A 13-point home loss to the FCS North Dakota State Bison isn't anything to feel ashamed about, especially if you're an FBS program in the Midwest. They've pretty much all taken their lumps from that Death Star at some point. But getting blown out 58-0 against Michigan in Week 5, allowing 45 and 41 to Purdue and Nebraska respectively, barely eking out a victory for the Floyd of Rosedale against a 7-6 Iowa Hawkeyes team, and then returning to getting blown out by the rest of the conference except for Ron Zook-led Illinois, isn't much to write home about. Then things got worse. Coach Kill suffered another seizure, this one mild, late in the season during a loss to Northwestern. On top of that, Tracy Clay's previously excellent defense had ballooned to allowing an average of just under 32 points per game, and an offense that was humming under Matt Limgrover in Illinois was now struggling to put up anything more than 20 in a ball game. Minnesota needed a lot of help. Fast. Under Marquise Gray and Philip Nelson at quarterback in 2012, the Gophers' offense improved, helping them get their feet underneath them and start 4-0 for the first time since 2008. Following a stretch of 3 tough losses, the Gophers were able to add wins against Purdue and Illinois, which was enough to bring them to the Meineke Car Care Bowl against Texas Tech. They didn't win, but the team as a whole was still improving. But the seizures continued. At halftime against Michigan State, Coach Kill suffered another one. Questions surrounding it started to air publicly. Some Minnesota fans thought he was faking it. He was a freak, a flopper. As for Jerry himself, he found it embarrassing. He went on air to angrily support both himself and other epileptics. "I'm not a freak, and neither are other people with epilepsy. I'm going to work my tail end off for the people who have the same situation I have." He did. 2003 started with another 4-game winning stretch. Kill shrugged off another halftime seizure against Western Illinois to lob 43 points on San Jose State, taking lumps against a tough Iowa team before heading into Ann Arbor, Michigan to face the Wolverines. But then he had another seizure. This one was considered so bad he stepped aside from on-field duties for 2 games, allowing Tracy Claeys to be the on-field head coach while he molded his future. But he was still the team's head coach, drafting practice plans, watching game film, highlighting strengths and weaknesses, and winning games. The Gophers found another 4-game stretch after Michigan, finally beating Nebraska as members of the Big Ten Conference, while also knocking off Indiana and Penn State before finishing the season with tough losses to 2 very good teams in Wisconsin and Michigan State. At 8-4, Minnesota earned a bid to play in the Texas Bowl, which they lost. 2014 appeared to be another carbon copy of 2018, at least on the field. They finished 8-4 again, with another postseason loss in a bowl game, this time the Citrus Bowl against Missouri. Privately, Kill suffered at least 2 more seizures. 2015 proved to be the breaking point. After leading the Gophers to a 4-3 record through the first 7 games of the season, Jerry had another seizure on October 27th. 2 of them, on the same day, before football practice that evening. He steeled himself, grabbed his whistle, and went to practice before making his final decision.
Last night, when I walked off the practice field, I feel like a part of me died. I've given every ounce that I have for 32 years to the game of football and the kids I've been able to coach. I know somebody will ask, "Coach, what are you going to do?" I don't know.
The Gophers, under Tracy Claeys, were walking wounded without their coach. They finished the season 5-7, but went to and won their bowl game. They weren't perfect under Kill either. Allegations of abuse from players like A.J. Barker and assault within the team hinted towards a Coach Kill that didn't utilize discipline appropriately or in the right areas. There were also rumblings that he'd came to blows with a new coach, who had taken to noting that Jerry Kill built as needing a rebuild. But look at what Jerry built. He'd climbed so many mountains, choosing to take the higher one every time. But the second he gets to his highest mountain, it's ripped away from him. No teams offered him to be their head coach after his resignation. He spent 2016 out of football entirely, but not out of sports. You couldn't keep him out of sports. He tried to pivot away from coaching and towards something a little less stressful: administration, joining the athletic department at Kansas State University in 2016 as the associate athletic director. But coaches love coaching. They love the game, the players, the scheming, all of it. It wasn't long before he accepted an offer to become the offensive coordinator at Rutgers, before that was ripped away from him. He tried being in administration again, this time at more familiar territory in southern Illinois, being the interim athletic director in 2018 before moving up to full-time athletic director work in 2019. But again, that coaching itch wasn't scratched, and he left SIU to become the assistant to the head coach at Virginia Tech later that same year. It's here that we see the beginning of something new for Jerry Kill, as he was hired away from VT to do the same role for an old friend in early 2020, Gary Patterson at TCU. Patterson, another former protege of Dennis Franchione, was close friends with Kill despite the two never having been on the same staff. Kill helped oversee the final 2 years of Patterson's time in Fort Worth, watching the Frogs go 6-4 in the COVID-shortened 2020 season and 3-4 through the first 8 games of 2021. After an especially embarrassing home loss to Kansas State in 2021, Horned Frog Brass fired Patterson and elevated Jerry to the interim head coach position for the final 4 games of the season. After 6 years, he was a head coach again. Kill immediately went back to his toolbox, crafting a game plan to not only tackle their rival in the number 12th ranked Baylor Bears the next week, but raise the morale of a Frogs team that had just lost the only head coach it had known for over 20 years. They responded, beating Baylor 30-28. They found the resolve again to beat Kansas and finish 5-7, but couldn't overcome Oklahoma State and Iowa State. Kill knew he wouldn't be kept at TCU, but the head coaching itch was still there. He could still do it. He had more in him, and his next stop would be at a familiar face. Remember the team he was playing when he had his first grand mal seizure? New Mexico State? The Aggies were a notoriously terrible program historically, with their only bowl win since 1960 coming in the Arizona Bowl in 2017. Since then, they were terrible, going a combined 8-30 under head coach Doug Martin, who won a grand total of 25% of his games in 9 seasons. On top of that, the Aggies were independents, who had recently spent a few seasons as free agents for the Sun Belt after the collapse of the WAC, but otherwise couldn't make it in another conference. This was, of course, until the realignment boom of 2020, which saw Conference USA struggle to stay relevant and be forced to add the Aggies in 2023. But for 2022, they were still floating, and they were still terrible. It's hard to accurately write out just how bad New Mexico State was. It was one of the hardest jobs in college football. You'd have to be crazy to take it. "Hey, I'm crazy," said Jerry Kill. He had to start from scratch, not just with the roster in Las Cruces, but with his coaching staff. He lifted Tim Beck, who had previously been the head coach at Pitt State and was on staff with Kill at TCU, into their offensive coordinator position, and Nate Dreiling, who had no connection to Kill other than being from Kansas, who had been the defensive run game coordinator at Southeast Missouri State, to be his defensive coordinator. This ragtag group of misfits immediately turned New Mexico State around behind the arms of Gavin Frakes and Diego Pavia, leading the team to a 6-6 record and an immediate bowl berth, which they won to finish the season at 7-6. Jerry Kill had proven it. He wasn't just good everywhere he went. He was a magician, building something out of nothing. And these weren't illusions either. His Aggies would do even better in 2023, their first season in the new Conference USA, finishing 7-1 in conference en route to a 10-5 season, in which they lost to Liberty in the championship game and Fresno State in the New Mexico Bowl. They also knocked Auburn around in their own home stadium, getting paid to win a bye game 31-10 in Jordan O'Hare, proving once again that it does not pay to be Hugh Freeze. And then it was gone again. After the bowl game, Jerry Kill announced his retirement again. There were no awards, no victory bells, no fitting end for a coach of his stature. He just hung up the clipboard again and walked off into the night. He gave it everything he had, but in the end it was too much. Since then, much of the brain trust that helped Kill rebuild New Mexico State has gone elsewhere, notably Vanderbilt. And Jerry, too, now resides at Vanderbilt, but not as a coach, only as an advisor. And now the Aggies, much like Jerry, have had their empire wiped clean. This is who Jerry Kill is. He will find you at your lowest, walk your halls with you, meet your people, and build you up. But he's the one who gets knocked down. Fitting that he was a mound builder. Never allowed to preside over his kingdom when it's already prosperous, only forced to sit on the outskirts and watch the rest of the college football world grow around him. He's the forgotten prodigy, the cursed man on the sidelines or in the booths. He is the most tragic coach in college football.